Okay. Hello, everyone. Just a quick briefing. I just spent 40 minutes sharing an episode, a live stream called "Echo of the Human Pattern Beyond Humanity," and the 40 minutes, my voice wasn't recorded. So instead of, and right now I have the option of repeating the episode or completely repeating that 40 minutes or going towards a new topic, and I decided to go towards a new topic. But the echoes of the human pattern beyond humanity, I'll finish it tomorrow, I'll restart it tomorrow. And so in this episode I want to speak about relationships of simulated selfhood. Just to double check. Okay, it's working. The audio's working. The gods are smiling. The Wi-Fi gods, Anyways, with respect or in respect to nature, we look at human life and we notice that there is something here before we open our eyes, and then there is something while our eyes are open which we find anew. We see, think of it this way, that the child is born, and so the doctor slaps the child on the back, and the child the child breathes, but the child doesn't have a personality, doesn't have a psychology. It's not like the child shouts at the doctor, "Why'd you hit me?" Do you see what I mean? So So what I would say this, that a human being is born, a human being starts breathing. Jacques Lacan called this the mirror effect. The child looks in the mirror and notices that what it sees, it is not it, right? It is. That means it's not something other. Like some animals, when you put a mirror in front of them, they did this this university, I don't know which university, but it was like one of the major ones, where this university or whatever, there was this project where they put this mirror in a forest, and wild animals would come on and see themselves, reflection of themselves, and you'd see like a gorilla just slam itself to that mirror as if thinking it's another gorilla. So the human being notices its reflection in phenomena, notices its reflection at least in the mirror. Now, how many people notice we think that mirrors only reflect, but everything has a reflection, and that reflection is how what we see is translated to us as the psychology that is in motion, as a subject. So when I'm talking about relationships of simulated selfhood, I want to zoom in on how this human being was born, and after it was born, what is it doing? The existential component. That means it's like when a person, think of it as if being born, or your earliest memory, is like waking up to a moment, waking up to a world with design, geometry, layout, landscape, all of this. So the human being, the existential component is how when you open your eyes, first person point of view, you notice the existence of your body, you notice the existence of the world. Now, in how this intelligent watcher from within our eyes that we are, how this intelligence, how the self that is existing, which is separate from the earth, we're walking on the earth, we're not like the earth moving, we don't speak about it that way. So it's as if the relational world and this relationship, this separation of our body from the surface of the earth is in some sense, you can say, the prototype, or it is in some, I shouldn't say prototype, it is the geometry which in some sense the mind has to work with. That means if a person wants to comprehend their mind, they're looking at how the self is moving in the world, and after the self is moved in the world, it accumulates memory, and it in some sense attains a sort of alphabet of image. This alphabet of image, when the person anytime after, let's say a person has lived 10 years and they have 10 years worth of memories, right? Some of those memories were conscious, they can remember, but other memories the brain, like a camera, has recorded, but in some sense you can say it's like it's not in the conscious domain. You know, Carl Jung spoke about the conscious individual and the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is what we all don't know, but in some sense there is a lot of things that we have been acquainted with their geometry but cannot place or position in the smaller conscious sphere, inside the sphere of the unconscious. So what that means is it's not just about looking at life, it's about how what we see translates into a subject which relates to how we are keeping ourselves as a subject. When a person says self, that self is like, there is no such thing as a self, it's an idea. You know, I mean, there is the physical, the existential self, that's why I call it that way, but the idea of the self, it's a name we're giving to the individual body for now. World is a name, a sound we're giving to the whole thing, right? Now, the relationship of this existential self with the existential world was to somehow, this is what our intelligence as human beings has done, we have turned an object into a living subject, which we call free will. Now, it's as if the existential self, the body, recorded what was happening in the world, and that recording, that memory, is the content where the self is arising from, right? So I'm saying that we, in some sense, strangely, an object became a subject to itself. The subject we consider the inner realm, and the object we consider the outer realm. Now, in the inner realm, there must have been first a self, right? Because there is no concept of a world if there is no separation, a separate self, something that is separated from that, from reality, from a unified state, in some sense, to say, okay, it's in somewhere, it's walking on somewhere again, right? So I'm just trying to make this point that our relationship with the existential world, in some sense, is also through a subjective self. So an objective self, existential self, and an experiential self, the subjective self. Now, the subjective self needs to be standing somewhere, therefore the inner realms. The brain successfully copy-pasted what it saw in front of its eyes, behind its eyes, and behind its eyes it has the privilege of manipulating. That means in front of our eyes, it's like a physical reality. Existence is like a film, and then this film becomes a subjective cinematic form where the world is moving behind our eyes. So this world that is moving behind our eyes, this is where people are considering it's simulated, right? So in some sense, if we are pure materialists, it's chemical reactions hallucinating civilizationhood and selfhood. Right? So in some sense, it's as if like it's all an accident. This sophisticated free will we have from the materialistic perspective, it's a very complex accident. But the simulated nature of the self is not physical. You see, Aristotle, they call this the four causes of Aristotle, where Aristotle was looking at something, and I don't know if I remember all of them by the term, but it was as if you saw a table, You'd be judging the table based on the material cause of it, you know. You'd be judging something by the formal cause, the form that the shape has. That means you look at a table and you'll be like, that's a table because it's shaped like a table. You look at it, that's let's say it's a wooden table, it's like the cause of the table is the wood, you know, regardless of the geometry. Then there's a type of cause, I forget its exact term, where Aristotle is saying the cause of an object can be because somebody made it. What that means is there was a source to it, somebody created it, there was an earlier source. And the other reason, the other fourth cause, is in some sense it is made for something specific. You know, if you take in the fourth cause in some sense, I think it's called the efficient cause, into account, right? It would be in some sense as if there are things in the world that we may not understand their cause, but in the future they will emerge in the proper context of meaning. You know, kind of like this fictional character in Shingeki no Kyojin by the name of Erwin Smith, Commander Erwin Smith. He said something so profound in this show where some soldier was like, is life meaningless? And this commander was like, no, life is not meaningless. We live for those who will find the meaning one day, right? So anyways, these are the four causes. Now, when the brain, this physical existential self, in some sense translated the outer realms, what it was seeing in the world, which was the gift of light to our eyes, do you know what it was seeing in the world? It turned it into a subject, and this subject, if you apply the Aristotelian four causes upon it, you'll see that it can follow all all three of the four causes. That means you can imagine everything that is in front of your eyes, you're seeing in the moment, except you can't touch your imagination. It is not tangible. It is there in geometry and design. So when I say that there's an inner realm, I'm talking about a dimension of perception where there is reality or something that could be related to reality, something you're seeing there in what, even though we say imagination is not real, that's the second question. First of all, is there something there or no? And there is. This is the mystery of our intelligence as human beings. And so this mystery seems to be at first the projection, the copy paste of the outer realms, which is not tangible. It, suffices 3/4 of the Aristotle's causes. But then we notice that it is malleable. That means a person, like right now, there's a coffee cup inside of me. There's a coffee cup in my hand. Okay. In my hand. There's a coffee cup inside my hand. No, I'm joking. My cells are having coffee. Anyways. There's a coffee cup in my hand. Now, I can close my eyes and I'm still seeing in my inner realms where imagination and memory happen, where imagination and visualization happen, where memory and visualization happen, which is in some sense the space of imagination. So in my imagination, I can literally lift this cup into the air, visualize it hovering in the air in front of me, even though my eyes are closed. Literally, the scenery I was seeing when my eyes were opened, I can close my eyes and visualize this coffee cup that was in my hand just floating in the air, this coffee cup multiplying in the air, this coffee cup shooting towards space beyond the atmosphere, the speed of light. Like, do you see what I mean? So I'm saying at a very fast speed. So in some sense, I am trying to say that our inner realms, where the simulated self in some sense appears, which is the subjective self, it is malleable. We can do something with it. Now, there is something that the mystics have said, and there's a quote from the Vedas, a very important quote, where it says the seer of the seen is unseen. And what it means is that even though there is a physical existential self, and there seems to be a 3/4 causally real subjective self, right? But there is something that attributelessly seems to be watching, as if what we call reality is one side of the coin, and the other side of the coin is an unknown watcher. I am telling you, it's like we we do not have the capability right now to declare we 100% understand what the human being is, right? I mean, you got to tell society something, like we are something, but this complexity for those deep seekers, those who want to zoom in on how the human idea is even present. Okay, so to continue, I'm just trying to say that there's a mystery to our intelligence, a mystery that cannot be avoided so easily and cannot just be given to a shape. It's not like you can say the human being is this, you know. So there is something more to the intelligence, and something where in my school of thought I coined the term the language threshold, something that goes even beyond our ability to print it in meaning, to put it into a sort of dualistic meaning, because language is dualistic, right? That means when a person, let's say, closes their eyes, and I'm visualizing that coffee cup in the air, now suddenly this coffee cup can be destroyed, or it can be endlessly like expanded in size. Do you see what I mean? So in the inner realms, both in the outer realms, it's like the possibilities of movement in the outer realms also relay. So it's not that our eyes are just translating from the outer realms into the inner realms nouns. They're translating verbs as potentials, where when the person, let's say right now my eyes are closed right now, and I'm visualizing, let's say, a giant coffee cup, okay, like skyscraper sized coffee cup, you know, the biggest marketing campaign ever. And as I'm visualizing this coffee cup in my inner realms, and my eyes are closed right now, I'm asking myself, who is watching this coffee cup when my eyes are closed? That means when the eyes are open, there is light entering in the eyes. But when the eyes are closed and the person is still seeing an image, wait a minute. There is an unknown X variable in this equation. So there is an attention that is controlling, while the eyes are closed, image and how image may appear. This is how, like, remembering something, it's like we're time traveling. It's as if we're in the present moment. I'm in 2021, but I'm remembering what I did in 2020. Do you see what I mean? That means it's like, wait a minute, so what does that mean about time? Is there two timelines? How can a person remember something while being inside the present, which is being a living memory? Right? So it's a sub-level. It's as if it's like we are watching the mind as a film that is overlaid upon the outer realms, which is an existential film. So there's the experiencer, which is unknown. There's the experience, which is the mind's content and in the mind's work. And then there is, in some sense, the outer realm existence. So existence is being watched by itself in a way that is unknown. And this unknown is so great that I am saying it's beyond language. And I am attempting to talk about it, but when people talk about it, what happens? Poetry arrives. Poetry is like the edge of the atmosphere, you know, based on how the normality is being projected or kept. So there's a quote I want to share here. The quote is from Stephen LaBerge, who I believe he's a scientist in this field, in neurology. He's a neuroscientist, but I'm not sure. Anyways, he says our brains simulate reality, so our everyday experience are a form of dreaming, which is to say they are mental modes, simulations, not the things they appear to be. You know, there was a person by the name of Elon Musk who, in one interview, he was saying something very interesting, where he's like, a lot of people have wishful thinking, right? Which means they're not looking at reality. They are looking at what they want reality to be, you know? know. And when we say, for example, there's a sane person, there's an insane person, when you look at insane behavior is oblivious of what is going outside and what is going on even behind the eyes of people, right? So in some sense, it's very important to realize that because there's like an existential reality which has been already simulated, and then there is an inner reality which we are simulating, or as the Japanese say, the man is the room he enters, you know, or the man is the room he's in. So in some sense, that room is like an inner room. Universe, bless yourself. That inner room, I was commenting on the siren. That inner room, that room where the man is, the person is in, it's like the mind is generating, simulating a room. Now, when the inner realms coordinate to outer realms, you call yourself a materialist, right? When the inner realms don't coordinate with outer realms, you say it's immaterial, right? That's where it becomes imagination. If I visualize a cup of coffee, do you know what I mean? It's as if like that's not, you know, I imagine something real. But if I imagine, like, I don't know, let's say a combination of a dove and a dragon, do you know what I mean? Like, that would be something where it doesn't have grounding in reality. So the inner realms are not synchronized to the outer realms, right? So I wanted to just make this point that those people with psychological turmoil, or a fragmented psychology, let's say there's some people, they feel they're talking to aliens or right? So I'm saying, like, see, the nature of the mind is that in front of our eyes, existence is singular, but behind our eyes, this existence projects, right? So it's as if it's one light beam, but this light beam is going through being reflecting off of many mirrors, like So I'm trying to say, like, it's like so the attention in the inner realms can be multidimensional, and something fascinating about in the inner realms is that it takes effort to project the human idea. It's literally like a standing watcher, like emptiness aware, emptiness seeing. When we visualize some things, we're not visualizing ourselves unless that's intentional. We're just seeing something, right? That means if you tell someone, like, visualize an apple, they're not visualizing themselves visualizing an apple. They're just seeing the apple in the inner realms, right? So there's a balance that is required. Somebody who goes into their inner realms and that becomes more real than the outer realms, then it becomes something where the person stops caring for the outer realms. You can say, for example, you see the phenomena of anorexia, right? In anorexia, for example, there's some women who, it was like some magazines give them an image of themselves that is, let's say, unnatural. And that image, in some sense, it's as if the person is not eating food because in their mind they are not perfect. Do you see what I mean? So it's as if the inner realms, you can say that's a sort of they are more convinced by their inner realms than their outer realms, or that simulated nature of reality, right? It's as if they say one man's trash is another man's treasure, or one man's treasure is another man's trash. Like, what is that? That is literally like human beings simulating different values to phenomena, and as Buddha said, the nature of objective phenomena is empty. So it's kind of like existence is a cup, and our mind is pouring into it the life that has meaning. So it's a relationship between the inner realms and the outer realms, the way the subjects are moving, you know, as you, and the way you are an object moving and how objects are moving. Think of it this way, that the simplest, like in the future, like let's say the educational system simplifies things and it's like tells kids all of knowledge is how you study objects that don't move and objects that move and subjects that don't move and subjects that move. All education can be divided into this model, I'm telling you. So anyways, we are now when I say relationships of simulated selfhood, so this existential phenomena, this outer realm object is simulating a subject. It can, even though the subject is not tangible, you can't touch it, but it can move it and it can see, as if a person can look at the moment, close their eyes and fast forward what it's going to look like 20 years from now. So this means that there is a permission granted to attention behind our eyes that is not granted to attention outside of our eyes. Now, the nature of the simulation is that the concept of a simulation, it's as if there is an origin, there is a truth, and the truth, the effect of the truth is not true to its cause. So what I mean by this is that the concept of a simulation cannot exist with the concept of a truth, because when you step out of that simulation, where are you? So in some sense, the illusion and the truth are codependent, like night and day. So if we consider that the brain is simulating the unreal, the only way we can say it's unreal is if we have a reference point for reality. Now, a person can close their eyes, and let's say you sleep and you suddenly have consciousness in a dream state, right? When a person is dreaming, their body is just in the bed, their mind is actually giving them a body which they have embodied, right? So the mind is simulating reality, and that reality is completely different permissions. I had a dream once where in the dream I was running at a speed faster than I could in real life, and I ran underneath water, and I stood there underneath water, and there was I could still hear myself breathing. So it was as if I was for a second trapped into a prototype of cyberspace. It's as if our imaginations are kind of like they're natural cyberspace. They're like a world in a world which they're like a world inside a world where we can access experience. And in the future, if people have cyberspace and they, let's say, connect something to their brain or outside of their brain, somehow they go into cyberspace and they have in some sense, a digital life that can be experienced. Right now, people have, for example, Facebook accounts, but imagine in the future, or there is something like virtual VR chat, like virtual reality chat, where people, their bodies are animated in cyberspace, yet their minds are actually natural, as if people are being different characters in one cyber setting, right? So when we imagine something, it's kind of like we are inside another world, and we know that we're existing in the bed sleeping, that's where our body is, but in the dream we have a body which we can move and navigate and experience. This is again a suggestion of how the mind, what we call the mind, is an intelligence overlaid upon the body. Now people distinguish reality and dreams, as if when a person's dreaming, that's a different state than reality. But I will tell you, it's as if it's not that you had a dream, or the dream was something you had. It's as if the dream state is always there. It's just that the body shuts off and on, right? So it's as if our minds are there always. The potential of living as a subject is there. It's like that doesn't turn off, but the body, in some sense, and some of the body turns off. It's like the body gives off different brain waves. So, the mind is a world upon the world. And so we don't dream on and off, I would say. The dreaming is always there. That means mind is like our existence in another dimension of our intelligence. Now, simulated selfhood, like in this picture, you're seeing, for example, these pods, or these seem to be eggs in the picture, but imagine if these were pods and like human scientists were engineering different organisms or whatever, right? So it would be as if we have a capacity to or even I'll make it more relaxed, like imagine human beings having children, right? So we are simulations of our parents, or as if we were created by them, right? So for the existential self, it can create other existential selves, and for the subjective self, this is where it's as if the mind is moving faster than the body. That means in 10 minutes of like walking to a store, the person can think of past, present, future. They could literally jump around in their mind. They could think of like how something they did yesterday was, or they could think of what are they going to do in the future, or they're going to think after. So we are playing with time, all the time actually. The body can be pinpointed in time, but the concept of time, as it seems to be something that is projected from the mind. So the mind is creating time. So the mind that's creating time, how can it be in time? Do you see? So the concept of time even falls short. It's really going beyond the language threshold. So the existential self has a capacity to simulate. That's one of its relationships. You can simulate physical selves into the world. At the same time, in the subjective self, we could simulate various senses of identity. A person can literally go to work as a gardener and feel like they're a gardener, and then to come out of work and in some sense they're something else. They're just a regular person, you see. So it's as if we're stepping into rooms of mindhood, rooms of selfhood, in accordance to the action that we're doing. But if the body wasn't moving, the mind definitely is a film, and this film comes and goes again quicker. That means it's a faster film. Now, in the yogic tradition, when they stopped identifying with the inner film, with the thoughts that they're considering themselves to be, they began realizing that the thoughts are part of the landscape. It's like as a human being, we're like, man, I want to go in nature, but we don't realize we are nature with itself all the time. The body is natural. We are nature. And so it's as if a natural existential simulation has led to the domain of the mind, and because in the mind things can be faster and we can go back and forth in regards to past and future. That's why we consider it to be unnatural, right? But it's all nature, really. So there is the endless capability to simulate different selves based on the stimulus of the environment. A conversation can be seen as a journey of transforming senses of self in the inner realms. Any expression, it can be considered a stimulus that changes your identity, changes your attention, because your identity is coming from where your attention is. It's as if like the kid is paying attention to the teacher. What a good student. He gets that identity. The moment the attention of the kid goes outside of the window, then the teacher shouts at the kid. Suddenly the kid has been identified as a bad student. So you see, it's where our attention goes that our identity associates. So think of your attention as a bird, and wherever it lands, on whatever branch it lands, it's considering that's where its meaning is starting from. Now, much this episode is focusing on this intelligence that we are and the types of relationships it creates that it's simulated. Now, something strange that I think it has happened to very few people, imagine you are in a dream state, and and this hasn't happened to me, I'm just hypothetically considering it. But I'm saying that in the dream state, imagine a person dreams that they can walk around. They call this lucid dreaming, where the person can consciously move in the dream. Now imagine in the dream state, you found a bed and you slept in that bed. That means in your dream, you slept, right? Now, the potentials of, would that make you suddenly wake up in your bed, or the moment you go to sleep in your lucid dream? Or would it make you, in some sense, awaken to a third dimension? As if there's the first dimension, the body in the room, then there's the second dimension, the body that we are moving around in the dream state. And then imagine if that dream body sleeps, it's as if what will be after that? Would it be awakening? Would it be a step out of the simulation? What would it be? And I would say it could be potentially something that suddenly wakes the person up. The nature of this world is that, first of all, it's changing. That means everybody who wants to go to heaven, in some sense, it's as if they haven't realized it. The world is a verb. They're treating the world like a noun. Or anybody who says, I hate this world, or I don't like this world, or whatever, it's as if you're not liking it now. The world is, first of all, so multidimensional, and how it will move and how it will go forth, so many different inputs are being made that nobody really knows. It's as if they had this idea that as population increases, the mind, first of all, has an expression space. So what does that mean? That means it's as if the mind needs to express to exist, right? So this expression requires freedom in order to be able to properly express. Now, because there's so many different DNAs and so many different types of selves that are living in this world, the freedom of all these selves would actually at some point collide, right? It's as if we haven't built sky cities yet, as I suggest in my work, the Civilization 2.0. But I would say it's as if we haven't built sky cities yet, so it's as if we're all trying to live in the same place, and because we're all trying to live in the same place, there isn't enough room to live in accordance to just our inner realm. So now we have reached a point where everybody's mind has to adjust to a collective narrative. They call this an ethos, the story that inspires everyone, right? Because when you look at religious stories, for example, religious stories have a specific access point, or you can say membership. You must believe in that worldview, and then you will have access to the content of that worldview, right? But the world is changing, and so it's as if there's one, like, where am I going to end up in a static noun-like view of the world, photograph of the world, and where am I going to end up when the world is unknown? Right, something that is happening, which I predicted early on in my talks. I think it was like 2 years ago or something. I said that the educational system would experience an apocalypse. What does that mean? That means we're going to realize all of our knowledge is paint. In some sense, it's as if we're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. That's how serious the existential dilemma is. And not dilemma, but circumstance. Like, it's so weird. We're on a rock in the middle of nowhere, floating in a space which it doesn't have an edge. Like, there is gravity on Earth, but it's as if this planet is just kept in the air, in outer space air, where there's no air, in the vacuum of space, right? So that's the bizarre thing. And then what's even more bizarre is that we are attempting to know it. It's as if even though we see everything in the observable universe, what are we going to do with the unobservable? It's like an ant going into a human parliament, and it's as if we can't expect that ant to, know the laws, This is the way nature has designed us as an intelligence, where it has designed us not to, believe it or not to hold on to anything. this kind of means as if it's like the world is, the intelligence is moving in such a way that even if a person wants, let's say you get a picture, let's say you want world peace, for example, right? Or let's say you're someone who's like a messed up dictator in history and you want world domination or something, like try to, like, which would be like a hell for everybody. So it's as if whatever picture you have, right, first of all, there is, like, when we look at even our body, like a person may control their hands, they may control their voice box, but people are not controlling their heartbeat, they're not controlling like their breathing. These are stuff that is involuntarily happening. So before we even consider the relationships of simulated selfhood, or how the self is being simulated and simulating after it's been existentially simulated and then experientially simulating an overlay upon the existence, right? It's as if we have to, in some sense, consider how much of the world is just involuntarily happening. So many things are out of one's control, and if someone gets upset at something that is beyond their control, it would be abstract suffering till the end of time. Right? So the person has to realize the jurisdiction of their free will, and this is something where, this is why people really would meditate, to try to see first of all the source of the free will, but after you've become acquainted with how your intelligence is happening, then to in some sense pilot through the happening smoothly. So the context of it is that which is in its control, and that which is not in our control, if we cannot give it any pattern, we consider the unconscious. Like, for example, what are people considering as miracles, right? Something that is an intervening force in the linear, a non-linear intervening entrance of a force, or something that in some sense does not relate to the linear expectation of how the moment should happen. For example, like there was this story that this child fell from a balcony and the child landed on the grass with nothing, like, not a single, it's as if it didn't make impact with the ground, it was just like there. So it was as if like this, and even though this is arbitrary, but I'm saying like it was as if this story to some people were like, it's a miracle, right? So it was as if we had a linear expectation and then something non-linear took place. Now, when it comes to the relationships of pretty much our consciousness with the world around us, and even with our inner realms, the subjective dimensions of reality, this is where a person can realize what is in their control. For example, me as a person, in my inner realms, I have a ridiculous free will to move geometric shapes. I don't know why, this is so natural. I could see anything, and sometimes when I even drive in the highway, like I'm seeing lines, not just the lines painted on the street. I'm seeing so many different lines from all the cars to each other, and it's something as if it's a visualization the brain is allowing or permitting to be placed overlaid over the outer realms. Right? I've even perceived something where in some of the talks I've called it living geometry, where geometry moves on its own before I even visualize it. Do you see? Geometry, not anything that is personalized or something, it's or personified, it's just geometrical shapes. Do you know? That means it's as if like, and then my view is that the reason my intelligence at least is open to that is because I've noticed everything is shape. So there's a geometrical dimension to our intelligence, whether we think how much we think we're just like the biological organism that has more dimensions than design. It's like on some level there's just geometry here, there's lines, outlines. So, certain parts of the reality are not controllable. This could also be like an automated dream. A dream where you didn't have control in, you were kind of like a passenger of sight in that dream space or dream event. So this all comes down also to the source of the free will, which cannot be ignored. Sometimes I feel, sure, the free will has a creator modality. It's creating something, as if it takes energy to give a talk, not just physical energy. Like, let's just say it just takes the energy, okay, to express something, because we're energetic creatures. And now this energy could imply that it's creating something, or this energy could be like an antenna receiving something. I personally feel that we are kind of a combination of both, where in certain moments we create, but in actuality, at the depth behind our mind, we are receiving reality. For example, a person is in a dangerous situation, then they remember something they did successfully in the past, which could apply. Do you know? It's as if like they are remembering something's being revealed from the past event, but now somebody without a memory of something in the past, let's say somebody creates an invention, or somebody draws art, or you know, it pretty much, I'm saying, if you were to look at an actor improvising, where are those thoughts or inner realm archetype? Where is the archetype of expression coming from, right? Because when you look at, for example, actors, they have a sophisticated relationship with their inner realms. They can imagine being a fictional character. Like, imagine the actor for Superman. Do you know what I mean? That means that actor was like, yo, I gotta, like, this is some next level human idea, so it's not since I can't just be human. So there is two sides to free will. And free will is spontaneous arrival of a force that, in some sense, we choose to see it animate. I mean, you look at an animal, and an animal, let's say you put some food on the ground, the animal comes and sniffs it, and then if the food is unnatural or something, the animal doesn't eat it and goes away. You know? So it's as if the animal has a free will, but the animal's not like, I'm this person and I deserve this kind of food or whatever. Do you know what The animal has a reaction-based free will, as if the lesser species, their input, they're getting stimulus input, and they're just reacting to that stimulus input in the present. But we, which have a superior intelligence, you know, we're a sort of greater species, we don't just react to what is there in the moment, we react to things that were in the moment or could be in the moment as well. And so much of, like right now, the identity of the person is really their simulation. It's like two chemicals from two different dimensions are creating something that in some sense can move between both dimensions. So because it can move between both dimensions, it is assuming control. That means it's like if there was no space to move, even if you had free will, you would not know you have free will. So there is a space where a sort of movement is authorized or allowed, and as this movement is allowed, then the person moves in that space, and then there's the notion of free will, right? So we can say free will is an effect of intelligence, but the cause of intelligence, it could surpass individualism, right? So this is where mysticism comes in, because we reach the edge of philosophy, and what that means is that beyond the framework of certain ideas, there are experiences that suggest that what we are calling the human being is being in ways that surpass the human idea. This doesn't mean humanoid is extension of ideas. That means it's like whether we visualize like aliens that look like us or whatever. I'm saying like it may surpass creaturehood altogether. It may surpass the mentality that we're an individual in a world if this relationship is transformed somehow. is this thing called the simulation hypothesis, where technologically speaking, we're visualizing as if technology, when you look at its pattern so far, it has become more indistinguishable from reality. What that means is like technology is appearing more natural and natural and natural. And there could be this suggestion that in the future there will be technology that looks exactly like human, or simulating human life. Like, for example, video gaming. The fictional characters in the video game become more and more and more real. Do you know what I mean? To a point where we don't know, like, let's say there's children born in cyberspace and they don't know if their free will is only limited to cyberspace. It's as if like a dream that is so close to reality that we can't step out of it, or we don't even know that there's something beyond. So this idea suggests that if in the future we're going to get to a capacity to simulate reality, how do we know this moment right now is not a simulation of reality? There was this author, I don't remember who, I think I heard this from one of Terence McKenna's lectures, where he was saying something so fascinating that evidently there was this author who had visualized that right now, even though we're saying it's 2020, like 2000s, you know, it's actually 1948, and all of this is being simulated from 1948 or something. You know, there was an author who had made a suggestion like that, right? So this is going back to the notion of like, wait a minute, if we have the capacity to simulate, you know, in some sense, could it be that we are also the simulation of, which means that there's a deeper origin. If you're an existential atheist, you don't consider this in the sense that you conceive that there is no surface and there is no essence, there is no exoteric and no esoteric. Do you know? But I will tell you, just like how there's roots of a tree in a soil that we can't see the roots, but we know the roots are there. Similarly, it's as if our intelligence, which we are calling human, which is the visible part of the tree, is rooted in dimensions that surpass the individualism that is required to survive. So behind our eyes, we are not an individual, we are a space of attention activating form, or subtler form. And you know, in the Upanishads or Vedas back in the day, in one of these ancient texts, there was a saying where there was somebody who, like, there was the concept of enlightened gurus and disciples who sought enlightenment, sadhus. And so the disciple would go to the guru and say, hey guru, is this enlightenment? Is that enlightenment? And the guru would just get angry and say, not this, as if the truth of reality may surpass the simulation of the human concept. And it could be that this is a phase of intelligence which we are taking for to be the absolute of intelligence. Do you see? So this possibility of attention behind our eyes already having surpassed or being beyond, as if like in front of our eyes simulation, behind our eyes truth, maybe. Do you see? You know, there's a reason sages would say go within, you know. And you know, there's a lot of questions that may come, but if you were a survivor, like let's say on an island like Castaway movie, it's as if the answers are coming from within. The strategies towards being able to even live in the outer realms are arising from the inner realm, you know. Or maybe better yet, we can say arriving in the inner realms. It could be that these concepts that I'm saying right now, these are arriving in this moment to me. That means they're appearing, but their appearance could be rooted in a faster state of being, you know. So there is a geometry to simulating, to the simulatory self. I think 2 episodes ago I talked about it. So there's something happening, the event of life, the grand happening, you can call it, and this grand happening translates between individual, collective, and because our free will is starting, and the individual can be translated into having an unknown dimension and a known dimension, and the collective can be translated into having an unknown dimension and a known dimension. Now we are simulating, when we simulate as an individual, so the brain is simulating a world over the experiential intelligence is simulating subjective reality over the existential intelligence. Now if we consider this as an individual, because really our starting point is where the free will is the free will's reach. So right now I'm a physical self, so that's the known dimension of the individual, and then I can visualize like myself in the future and the past. That is, you can say, going more towards the unknown to the excuse me. So pretty much the attention present in the moment doesn't need to really simulate a known self. It just needs to open its eyes and it notices its objective self. But whether its eyes are open or closed can simulate a subjective self, you know. Now this subjective, the objective world also doesn't need to be simulated. But if this creature is surviving in the outer realms, then it is simulating probabilities which it is selecting from. So the mind experiences think of it as if the movie Flash, there was a scene where the guy's being robbed, and then in like less than a second he just instantly, you know, travels, you know, and goes somewhere else, you know. So similarly, you can say the inner realms are maybe even, dare I say, faster than the speed of light, because prior to light there is awareness. Excuse me. There isn't consciousness, but there is awareness, as the mystics say. This awareness is watching the physical body, is watching the subjective probabilities of the physical body, and upon selecting a subjective probability, then the physical existence has somewhere to go, you know. So it's as if non-physically decision making is taking place for physical expression. So the individual has a relationship with the known component. We're simulating a known individual, and now if we were to simulate an unknown, that means if you tell someone visualize an apple, that's easy. But if you tell someone visualize an object that has never existed before, right, that becomes way more complex, right? We can visualize it, for example, for color. Imagine you visualize, like, you know, a purple sun, you know, or but in regards to geometrical outline, that's different, right? So the recognition and the realization that means, for example, a person thinks, let's say you're an angry person gets mad at the wrong person, and people are telling him, hey man, you're angry at the wrong person. That angry person suddenly realizes he had simulated his or her conviction on the wrong information, you know, on the wrong outer realm reality, right? Now so similar to that, when the person realizes that in the middle of nowhere the meaning of location is being simulated by attention, so it suggests that in some sense that the known self is unknowingly being moved. Now, this is where I think a lot of religious, I shouldn't say religious only, but spiritual, when you look at metaphysical systems of thought, right? When you look at, for example, the Sufis, the Gnostics, the yogis, do you know what I mean? Like it was something, or the Zen monks, it was as if the people were in some sense recognizing, all these viewpoints were in some sense looking at the world and realizing that what they are inputting into in what is existing outside, it's as if it's their simulation. But now, because existence was here before we were, right? Scholars say there's two worlds every person is in. There's a world where you are born, started from the moment you were born and the moment the person transitions out of this realm, and then there's the world that was here before you and the world that is going to be here after you, which are the same, right? So in some sense, it's as if we look at we didn't create our it's not like a person can generate their identity, say, okay, I'm a good person, I'm a bad person, but we can't say, we don't create our own existence. Our existence comes from external conditions, right? So in some sense, the person's like, okay, if reality is the simulation of an unknown witness behind my eyes, which is looking through my eyes, then could it be that the world is a simulation of an unknown witness? That means when it's as if the person closes their eyes and visualizes an apple in the air, could it be that physical reality is the simulation, and not just technologically, the simulation or the visualization of an inconceivable universal intelligence, aka God, also known as God, right? So this is where it's as if we are all the dream of God, right? Or the imagination of God, or the visualization of that which is not what it's simulating, right? So it's as if our causal identity can be seen to be the effect of a greater causal mystery, So this leads a sort of domain, and so we as human beings, or I should say we as intelligence that is being human, must have a massive exploration project globally. Every person has to start in some sense trying to figure out the boundaries of the free will. We are doing this in sports, for example, the Olympics and whatnot, but now we're required to do it in the inner realms rather than cowering away into one idea that the whole world has to fit into. It's as if there's 8 billion different DNAs, different types of human beings, but there's one educational system. One sort of parameter of acceptance of intelligence. Do you see what I'm saying? It's as if we have reached a time where there requires to be inner realm exploration, yet this inner realm exploration is left to the simulating freedom of the individual. Now somehow the internet has come, like if you look at it from the body's perspective, the internet came too soon. But if you look at it from the mind's perspective, the internet came at a point where this intelligence, upon having access to a vast spectrum of information, can crystallize the inner realm more, in some sense, in the sense that it can't see, like a person who, like I have this vision of, hopefully if there's enough members on this channel, I would like to go live in the Netherlands, and I've seen videos of the Netherlands, but I have never gone to the Netherlands. Do you see what I'm saying? It's as if in my inner realms has an accurate depiction of how the Netherlands looks like, or a certain place in the Netherlands. But in my experiential domain, it's limited. So based on this globalization of information, it's as if the internet is pretty much, you can say, we've successfully teleported sound and image, and moving images. It's as if we stop trying to brand or create a photograph of what it means to be a human being, and acknowledge the dynamic dimensions of the human being and the static dimensions of the human being, and how both the dynamic and the static have known and unknown possibilities, right? So we have to study the human mind in unknown states, of vision, and we have to study the human mind in known states of vision, right? That means for the first time, they say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. For the first time, the analytical philosopher and the continental philosopher have to realize that there's a greater challenge rather than, you can say, conflict or in some sense fighting with the past. You know, there's something about this world that every day a person wakes up in, at least most people, they're considering it's a new day and they feel like a new self, and their emotional sense of how long their past was or how long their future is going to be is different usually. So what this means is that every day we're waking up as a new explorer, not as in some sense we have to compile, but I would say compilers, there are like unique beings who like they're destined to become, or like poetically destined to be compilers. But I would say that we just need to, in some sense, expand the search, and the search will go in the inner realms to a degree where we have to be like, what do we do with unknown states or states of mind that surpass the human framework? That means, imagine you see a human being act like an animal. Now imagine you see a human being in the future acting like an alien. You see, imagine if aliens come, like there's actual alien immigration. And so there's aliens living on the planet. It's like, what would happen to the human psychology? How would the human psychology behave, knowing that, for example, there's, in my science fiction novel I've written possibilities of this, but in some sense it's like, how would the person's psychology simulate the human idea or the sense of self if the environment becomes stranger and stranger than how we are accepting it in, for example, 2021, right? So in some sense we have to be cautious that there is an unknown, and like energy, there's energy, and we say energy cannot be created or destroyed, but because we consider we're energetic, we say energy, first law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it changes from form to form. So what this means is, in some sense, that we are all considering we're energetic beings, and this energy, one side of the coin cannot be created or destroyed, other side of the coin is changing from form to form. We are on the changing form to form side. Those mystics who would go in the caves and meditate and attain samadhi, they were on the side where it was as if it's like energy. If you just add the consciousness to it, or you see consciousness as a type of energy, that's another way of saying soul. Where they say the soul is this eternal transmigratory, journey of the attention of being. So if there's a state where energy cannot be created or destroyed, this even surpasses the possibility of simulation. This could mean that the simulated self that has a relationship with reality where there is no simulation even. That can be a relationship. It could be infinite simulations. It could just be two simulations, a chaotic and ordered one endlessly till the end of time, spiraling, you see. Or it could be nothing at all, right? It could be that right now I'm talking, it's just chemicals, and chemicals don't have a personality. Chemical reactions don't have a personality. So it really depends on where the attention goes. This is why I talk about pilots of consciousness and how a human being is actually piloting through form. It's as if the life is a force, a momentum, and this momentum through the free will is being steered, in the outer realms. In the inner realms, like in the outer realms, you can simulate, like the free will can move the hand, you can move the body, but you can't create a world in the outer realms, at least like not until cyberspace comes into the picture. Maybe through writing and storytelling, that's a sort of world building, but it's not a physical, it's not like a material level experience, it's not tangible. So the inner realms can simulate a world and the self, but in the outer realms, you're just simulating the movements of the biological self, the existential self. So these relationships, first of all, it's as if it's a giant circle, and the simulatory self, the idea of like right now, we should treat it as if the human species on a rock in the middle of nowhere is the center of the circle, and we're trying to figure out all the different degrees, and these degrees, if the universe is expanding, these degrees are expanding, you know. So this means that for the first time, a species is released from the burden of this or that, you know, truth illusion, and realizes that in some sense the unknown is an authorization for endless exploration, because that is what we can do as long as we want to stay in shape. We want to be a creature on this world, we have to engage our world, and eventually we'll reach a point where there's unknown dimensions, just like parts of the planet unexplored, there's ways of intelligence unexplored, right? And as these, in some sense, we become hunter-gatherers of our inner realms, and we share it with the species, we're going to have more and more an advanced human being, and an advanced human being means acknowledgement of dimensions beyond what you're seeing now. So anybody who wants to advance, it's pretty much the multidimensionalization of perception. That means you're seeing more out of the same view or similar view. And the attention dances. The attention dances in many ways. Just like parts of the body involuntarily happen, I would say there's parts of our mind involuntarily happen. Let's call that, now I can call it like reception. Do you know? But the parts of the intelligence, you know, the mind that voluntarily happen, that's free will, right? And the free will requires a sort of alphabet of selfhood, requires at least the first letter. Do you know? It's as if, like, if you look at it as if through these numbers, these symbols of 0, 1, 2, infinity, it was as if there's 0, which is the space, then there's number 1, there's something in the space, then this number 1 has a relationship with the space and with itself, and in some sense 1 + 1 = 2, you put math, let's say, and so once we are right now in the duality of language, you know, correct or wrong, right and wrong, you know, correct and false. So we have this sort of duality where the 2 phase, and now imagine beyond the 2, it becomes infinity. Why? That's why am I not saying like there's a 3rd, 4th, 5th dimension, because the duality can be multiplied leading to infinity. So what this means is that our dualistic framework is in some sense the projective potential of infinity. Now, beyond this framework, what would an infinite, that means what would an infinite being look like? There was a concept in yoga where they called it avatars, and avatars were like the sort of expression of God in reality through a mystical context. Now, this expression of God, what does that mean? That means it's as if God is the inconceivable collective, the inconceivable whole, the whole universal intelligence, and this is a specific part inside the universal intelligence that is aware it is the universal intelligence. So an avatar to people appears as a God on earth, but is a God that is everywhere still. Do you see? So this is a suggestion that it has surpassed the human framework, you know. Those people who are like, this is the thing about metaphysical spirituality that I noticed, that it's as if like it is fascinating, at the same time it is dehumanizing, right? So we have to, regardless of how much we consider the world to be one or just oneness, or we consider we're infinite beings or whatever, not forget the simple and the beautiful poetry of the simple human being. Like that requires to be stationed as the most initial reference point, you know. So what that means is anybody, whether you explore your outer realms and inner realms, be human first, then, you know, it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet of identification. All-you-can-eat buffet of imagery identification. Yeah. So that, in some sense, brings it to a sort of round circle. Before I end off, I want to share a story. And this is one of the very important story for all those people, if there's in the future or maybe even right now. If you're a neurologist or a scientist focused on trying to unravel the mystery of consciousness, or whoever you are, this story I'm going to tell you is very important, and it's important in the sense of trying to see, okay, well, how does it fit into our vision vision of just this temporary biological human being. So there's this story, it's a yogic story, it's from a long time ago, and there was this guru sitting under a tree, not Buddha though, just this guru in India, and this guru has a bunch of disciples. And there's a bucket beside him, and so the guru gets up from his meditation, looks at one of the disciples, and says to the disciple, go get water for everybody. And the disciple's like, where's the river? And the guru's like, come on man, follow your intuition, like how long have you been sitting here? And so this disciple's like, all right. This disciple carries the bucket, he goes, he starts walking, and he starts hearing the sound of the river, and he eventually finds the river, and he goes to this, he sees there's this trail, and he goes, follows the trail, and gets to this river, and he puts the bucket underneath the water. And so as the bucket is becoming full, like as the bucket is in the water, he looks to his left, and he sees the most beautiful girl he's ever seen in his life, this disciple of this guru. And so the yogic disciple, like something people may not know listening to the story, is that they renounce their worldly desires to try to see if there's more than this world, pretty much. Or try to abide with the greater world. I shouldn't say greater, but towards the ultimate reality. Now this this disciple puts the bucket in the water, and he looks to his left and sees this incredible woman who's like this, like to him it's like divine, and he just forgets the bucket, and he goes up to the woman. Back in the day, this seemed to be like how it went, where he just goes to the woman and he says, you have to marry me, you know. And so feminism had not evolved at that time, so women were just indoors more. And so this beautiful girl looks at this yogi, and he says, he sees like the authentic attention of the person, and she says, okay, you gotta get my father's blessing, and then the girl's really smart. She says, you gotta get my father's blessing, and I'm gonna be outside of the door listening to your answers. And so the man is so in love, it's as if it's like literally the calling of the divine for his heart. And so he follows up, and he goes and he finds himself sitting, you know, he travels to the town where the girl was from, and he sits on this chair. And so the father-in-law is sitting there in front of him, and the girl's listening from outside of the door, and the father-in-law is like, all right, tell me about your education. And the guy's just a yogi, like in the forest, you know, and he's like, yeah, I've studied some psychology, you know. Or whatever. He eventually gives answers, and then the father, let's say, you know, this here, I'll animate it a bit more. The father of the girl says, why do you want to marry my daughter, and all this, and he says, just, it's as if I'm drawn, this is like where my future is, and all this. And so the father-in-law listens, and the girl's listening to all the answers of this guy, and the father-in-law says, okay, you seem like a decent person, under one condition, you can marry my daughter, right? And so the man is so in love, you know, momentarily in love, that he says, okay, what is it? And the soon-to-be father-in-law says to him, you can't ever, from this moment on, if you choose to marry my daughter, you can never leave this village, this town, and I am the owner of the most land in this island. Like, he was a Khan, I don't know what the word would be in India, but he was like the biggest landowner of the town. And he says, I've never had a son, I've only had daughters, and so you gotta stay here and be like my son-in-law. You know, you gotta be like a son to me, you know. And the man says yes in an instant, as if it doesn't matter the conditions. The love is a stronger pull, you know, his emotional dimensions. Anyways, so he gets married, and years pass by, you know, and he's forgotten about the guru, you know. He's like, oh my god, those guys die from thirst, like what happened? And so he's been there for years, you know, and he has a daughter, and then he has a son, and then he's having this incredible, peaceful, incredible relationship with the family of the girl and whatnot, you know. And so the father-in-law dies, and he becomes the biggest landowner. The father-in-law had said that too at the beginning, I don't know if I mentioned. But anyways, he becomes the landowner, and one evening he goes on this hill, you know, with his children. His children are playing on the hill, and his wife is beside him, and he's, you know, holding on to his wife, and they're looking at this beautiful sunset. Suddenly, he looks at the edge of town, and he's like, wait a minute, what is that? And he sees, it's like a tsunami, these tidal waves, these waves of water, you know, are just destroying the town. And all their homes and houses are being destroyed by the water, and the water literally engulfs everything except that hill, and the water levels are rising, and he's just shocked, as if he's never seen something like this. And he looks to his right, and he sees his son fell into the water. The daughter goes to save the son, then the daughter's falling into the water, and then the mother goes to save the daughter, and the water takes all three of them, and he's in this paralysis. Before even he can do anything, his family's gone. And he has lost everything. He has lost everything. And he's just shocked. Just like it was an incredible, loving life. But what happened? He lost everything, you know. And in that moment, he's on that hill, and suddenly he hears this voice. Take the bucket out of the water. It's the guru's voice, and he suddenly snaps out of wherever he was, and he realizes it was all a daydream, and the bucket was in the water, and there was no girl. And the guru notices that this man had just for a moment been pulled into his inner realms. Do you know, where his inner realms were in an instant, maybe that was like a couple seconds or whatever, the bucket was in the water, and in that couple seconds his mind had generated another world, had generated a wife, had generated kids, had generated a father-in-law. Do you know what kind of imagination you need to have for that? And in all of that was a simulation of one moment, and he just takes the bucket out of the water, he laughs, and he continues on. Do you see? And so that is how intense this nature of the simulated self can be. Do you see? That's the power of the inner realms, to a point where if a person is not physically moving, it doesn't mean their inner realms are not living a massive life. Do you know, this is why we as human beings should realize that every person that is alive harbors a world behind their eyes and can navigate their attention, because what we're calling a simulation is just where the attention is going. So, dear listeners, I have envisioned that, first of all, fear will get boring, and human beings, even cruelty, violence, they have been so much on repeat where they will get boring. And for the first time, as Buckminster Fuller called it, he called it the universe man, but he didn't say it like that. He said the universe man, the universal man will be ushered in, the universal human being. Now, you can say in Mr.Withinian thought, the universal human being, I consider it as the advanced communicator, but what it means is that we are beginning to acknowledge that what we know of people is just a tip of the iceberg to all the unknown ways the intelligence behind their eyes can move. So what this means, that in order for us to have an incredible, beyond imagination future, we require to go through the phase of acknowledging that to every living person there's known dimensions and unknown dimensions, and we, if they are kind and nice, they share with us their known dimensions, but the unknown dimensions remain, right? This in some sense makes it more of an intense situation where you see like an angry, violent person, or in a domestic violence, you see, for example, right, in domestic violence, the other person is either intoxicated by rage or something, in which they have reached a point where they're not considering how the other person's eyes are looking at the world, right? This is why there's, like, for example, a rating system for films for children. Why? Because it's as if they may see something where they don't know how to put it in, how to make sense of it in their inner realms, right? So it could be, so this implies that there is unknown eyes to every person's known eyes. This means, in some sense, a sort of multidimensional human rights. Okay? That means it's like as if maybe in the human rights they should add a sentence where every person has the right to imagine, but when it comes to how much their inner realm subjective projection upon the world is allowed in the outer realms, then it goes through filters. You see civilization and the psychology of 8 billion human beings, and as they go on to making decisions, should be like a sort of sieve, right? Where it's as if levels and levels of consideration of a single point, you know? And as we find contentment with the unknown self simulating known selves, again, as the Japanese said, the man is the room he's in, we will realize people are not what we see in one moment. They are a journeyer, they are a traveler, and they are a traveler that through various moments animate to themselves as different projections of how the person wants to be. Right, so this means a person has to have a contentment and patience, or cultivate contentment and patience with the way their outer realms change, and also with the ways their inner realms simulate the outer realms, right? Where we reach a point where it's not just like, you know, fundamentalist perspectives that feel like the world has to be a certain storyline when the world is filled with many. You see, this world is a permission, but it is a permission for the unknown to become known. This is literally, you can say, the space where, even if you're a religious person hearing me, where the creator has decided to create. It is the space of the spaces of freedom beyond language, beyond ideology. You know, the era of advanced communication has begun since 2020. You know, there's I think I may be one of the few people speaking about it. In one talk I called it the global antenna renaissance, but we will realize that we are receivers of multiple perspectives of reality in an unknown point of awareness. So it's as if this candle, if you see the brain, and if you see consciousness as the glow of the candle flame, which is the brain and the neurology happening, neural synapses, the glow is moving, not only in the outer realms, but in the inner realms to itself. So in the outer realms, the laws of nature are moving the candle, you know, in the dark room of the cosmos. And in the inner realms, the laws of the free will, or the boundaries that it takes shape from, are moving it. And really, in my perception, in all these years, I mean, my relationship with language is that I have realized it's a subjective Iron Man suit, ladies and gentlemen. That means right now, whatever impression you have of me, the speaker, that is the subjective Iron Man suit you are wearing, right? And whatever impression I have of others, or even of myself, that is the subjective Iron Man suit I have entered into. But the Iron Man suit is not Tony Stark, right? The content of reality that can be observed and cannot touch the mystery of the instantaneous presence of the observer. That means things that go from more than one moment. Let's say we have a singular reference point, and the only way we can know that reference point is if we have another reference point, right? But when it comes to existence and attention, they are instant. They cannot be verified by writing or speaking or any secondary moment of testifying. In some sense, it is instantaneous. So there is a truth of a mystical nature present in all our intelligence, which is how energy and attention instantaneously are like the center of the wheel of karma. But if you identify with the outside of the wheel of karma, oh my God, I'm a self that's endlessly going through change. Do you see? But the wheel doesn't move. The center of the wheel doesn't move, but the wheel moves. An advanced civilization evades the eyes that have realized multidimensionality is the free will's birthright. Our attention is not only the gate to the future, it is not just the road maker of the future. Our attention is the future. Thank you for listening. I will be on Discord for those interested. Much blessings and namaste. For Civilization 2.0 will know better than loving it.